So I'm going to do a new series called Behind the Comics, and I'm going to tell you about some creative stuff that happened behind the scenes of some of the comic books I created as I have them laid all out across my house right now. And I'll give you guys a look. So my goal is to sell all of these copies in 2025. You guys can see I've emptied out my bins. These are all the different comics. We're going to go over a bunch of the creation behind this. I've set up my single issues, my issue runs. So these are actual series I'm behind. I'm the writer behind, and for most of them, the creator. And then my published works that goes through Scout Comics. So I'm going to explain some interesting stories behind the scenes and give you guys some insights to the books that I have created and how I went on this journey. All this and behind the comics. And each one will have a little spot that says which comic we're talking about in a comment above. You can find most of these listed if you're interested in purchasing a copy at AnderSiN.site. But understand a lot of these books are going out of print. They're never going to be reprinted again, especially the alternate covers. So once they're sold out, they're done. You guys can see I'm not wearing socks today, so you get free foot, little toes. But yeah, and there are even books that haven't made it here because they've already sold out. So this is Mr. AnderSiN behind the comics. You can find most of these comics again at AnderSiN.site. That's SITE, and it's AnderSiN, ANDERSIN. So I'm going to do. Welcome to Behind the Comics, The Advocator Presents. So here on display is everything that the Advocator produced that is still around with some alternate covers. And I'll go over a few of the covers, not all the covers. And I'll talk about different things about this project and some behind the scenes in this project, including my characters and some of the other creators, and including who we dedicated this to. But before that, let's get into our hashtags. So hashtag binary star, and of course have hashtag advocator, hashtag reapers, hashtag hell, hashtag werewolf, hashtag creator own, hashtag zombies, hashtag kink, hashtag dimensional, hashtag Wizard of Oz, hashtag animal, hashtag seed seekers, and so much more. So the basic idea was I was known at the time as the indie advocate, and I had met up with someone named Travis Gibb. And Travis was talking to me about making anthologies and such, and I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do next. It was going to be called the Written Sins Anthology. And I came really close and successfully funded a similar project, but it was just my written works. And it was during 2020, and I was going through the death of my mother. So I wound up canceling that project, but that was 2020. This is further back. This starts back in 2000, I want to say 17 is when I met Travis Gibb. And at the time I was working with Chuck Pino, and he was editing things for me. So we all got together and we worked on this project, and we dedicated it to Stan Lee. Sadly, Stan Lee passed while we were doing it. This came out in 2019, so that means I started working on this since this was winter. This was a 2018 project. So I'd met Travis Gibb more than likely in 2018. He kind of pitches an idea that I should use the indie advocate thing as a way to kind of help other creators. He wants to take pre-established, already created stories and give slices to it. And we bring Chuck on board as the editor, and we kind of go from there. Now, this only lasted 3 issues. And I'm going to just say it here. There was a lot of ego that got in the way of this project. A lot of ego, and I'm going to take ownership of my ego. I can be difficult to work with, especially back then. I thought I knew everything I wanted to do. And I felt like if this was going to be called the Advocator, because it was kind of coming on to what people would see from me, I had to have a lot of ownership of it. And that led to a lot of problems behind the scenes. And we'll go over some of those. End of day, it probably ruined some relationships, definitely a lot of ego. And it was sad because it was a great idea that just never got off the ground. Now, I had a lot more of these books. I have not given up on the project despite never having anything published since 2018. So this ended in 2018. And We kickstarted all three successfully. I'm very proud of what we had. I'm proud of the things I did inside these books. And I'm glad I had the opportunity. I learned a lot. And it wasn't the first time I tried to team up with people where it went south, but this was a time where I can honestly say that I don't think it was about anyone being a bad person. I just think it was different opinions going different ways. And we brought together a whole lot of people. So I'm going to highlight a few things because this would be a very long video if I gave you a pitch for every single thing. But I'm going to go over a few of the issues. In the first book, what we had definitely was, and this became the issue throughout the series, I'll be honest, we never had someone who is ideally in charge of the product, and it was really, honestly, if I'm being truthful, me and Travis butting heads and Chuck trying to keep peacemaking going, and then interacting with all the other creators. And even interacting with the other creators could be problematic. I'm not going to call anyone out. I own what I did in this. However, one of the things that did come out that wasn't so great was the first issue was printed on horrible paper. It really was bad. It was kind of disgusting the way it felt. I hated it from day one. And you can see over here, these, I think this, yeah, these are the original. You feel that. Now, we wound up hooking up with a very good printer after this in Cape Coral, Direct Impressions. This has this cover that you'll see a lot throughout this series that I'm making, and it's a great cover. And I'm really was excited, but hated the original. So I tried to sell as many of the alternate covers as I could. And you can see I am basically out of alternate covers at this point. I only have the Grimwood Crossing and Binary Star. One of the things that I fought a lot about was not putting logos on the book because the book was the Advocator. And you'll hear it throughout this series. I'm not a huge fan of all covers. I think they're gimmicky. I understand why they're on Kickstarter, but they're not great. So for the first issue, we had The Void, Grimwood Crossing, Binary Star, which Jamie Primack is amazing. Into the Void was Chuck's story, and I stayed out of the book, believe it or not. I did some lettering, and that was about it. Not Broke Down Yet was a nod to Broke Down. And there was a different amount of bodies per issue, Modern Testament and Mary Revised. So the winner for me in this project, even though I worked on The Void as a letterer, I think Binary Star was the best in the group, to give credit. And Travis went on to definitely have success on Kickstarter with 4 Dead Bodies, and then of course more bodies came. I'm sorry to see The Void was never produced more though. But yeah, and you can even see Belial, something that was coming from Chuck here on that. We got to the second issue, and this was problematic area, and I don't really want to talk about it. Behind the scenes, there was a death that definitely affected things. We brought someone in. I think it was in our idea. This was someone who was going to help us. This is the first time I was going to be in the project. I got together, and thanks to Zane and our fallen brother Keith Thomas, who sadly passed away of stomach cancer, we brought Into the Suck that crossed over with Barbara Unleashed and Manny Wolf. And you'll hear me talk more in the series about both those projects, but this meant a lot to me because I promised Keith that we'd continue to promote them. We brought in Seed Seekers, Martha Stewart. We brought in, and let me get the book over here, and I'll show you the different cover that I did and something cool. We had Mazzini, the Samoan Wolf, Lopsided, and Nature Boy, and Mary Revised. Oh, Mary Revised. I don't think we mentioned it in the first. Yeah, we did. Mary Revised. It finished. The other side got the sequel. Some great creators in here. I honestly love my story the most, but Seed Seekers was really good. And I like the Mary Revised. The problem with this was Lopsided, that was made by John Crawford. By the way, this book was a banger. It had a lot of great stories. A lot of this series didn't really have bad stories, so this was a great idea. And look, I even got it signed by different creators and randomly mixed them into my pile. Lopsided, sadly, when I wasn't watching because someone else was supposed to be in charge, the actual imagery is not sharp. This all looked faded. And it was one of those things where someone else was given this. None of us paid attention to the final copy, and it went to print that way. And that broke my heart. We trusted the editor. If you're behind a project, and the editor is not a bad person, they do great work. It was just a bad situation. So that became, it's like a black eye on the second issue. So by the time we got to the third book, and the second issue, by the way, I got my alt cover here, which I really liked, and I really liked the seed stickers. And then Zombiful Oz comes out in the Advocator Fall Edition, which I called the Advocator Halloween, which had Manny Wolf, which I loved exploring that character more. Belial, right there, you can see the cute little imp. That was from Chuck and Sean Barbour, who's on TikTok. This was really great. This is my winner for the fourth issue, if I can't pick my own story, which is Manny, the cosplaying detective, Manny Wolf. I kind of got the alt cover here. It's one of the few alt covers I liked. I liked my alt cover for this, and I even used the Advocator Presents and used the crossover. The third book was a lot more fun to do at the time. There was a lot less drama, but it definitely felt like we were ending it. Like there was no plan for another book at the time. Egos and feelings had been hurt, but Dead Kingdom, The Chimp with the Brown Hat, and The Zombiful World of Oz all ended us strong with Reapers, Manny Wolf, and Belial. And I look back at it now as a missed opportunity. I wish I had the maturity I do today. I think we could have done a lot more because there are so many great projects in here that just, it was a miss because of ego. And I own my part in it. And that ego problem is definitely something I've worked on since then. And I think I've gotten better now. Welcome. Welcome to the Behind the Comics, Mr. AnderSiN's collection. Today we're going to be looking at The Fourth Monkey, which I was in under online bullying, and it was called Trollgate. And this was the idea that what happens if you bully someone online and then they decide to unalive themselves. And how does the world look at it? It was a much bigger story than I wanted, and I got 1,000 cuts. It was the first time I was very edited, and I understood it. I've always thought about going back and expanding on the world, and at the time it was weird because I made the story, we were just about done with it, and suddenly the news it hits that someone's actually being arraigned for it, and there's a trial going on, and someone's going to be going to trial over the very idea. And I kind of watched it as this all went down. And it was the first project I worked on with anyone else. Most of the projects I had worked on, while I had done little smaller projects, this was something I had been put with another creator on. It wasn't a choice. And it took a little while to come out because I wound up doing other projects in the meantime. I don't know what the delay was. I was never informed about it. This is available on Amazon too at this point, as far as I'm aware. It's one of my favorite actual books I've ever worked on. And when people say that I'm not political or I stay away from stuff like that, they don't realize that I one of the first things I ever created was about social issues, because the tagline is it's from 30 creators from around the world, 8 stories about environmental and social issues. And it touched on a lot of great stuff. It really was a very awesome. I still love Bob Sally's story about abuse. Obviously, I love my online bullying story, Trollgate. And I mean, there just wasn't a bad story in this one. The art was amazing. Chris Madd is in here. Like I said, Bob Sally is in here. Sorry, I didn't mean Chris Madd. I meant Stan Yak. Chris Madd is in a different book with me, a different anthology. But we didn't work together yet. We've done some background stuff. So here's mine. I signed that a while ago. So it was called Trollgate. Not the original one I had, but it's what we decided to go with. It had great art. Oh no, Chris Madd is here. Ha, I'm not a liar. Painted Prey. I knew he was in here. See? You work on things and then you begin to forget. I can't believe I forgot. I knew he was in here. I can't believe I doubted myself. And some pinups for it. This is one of my favorite books. I'm down to just 3. Of course, I have one for myself that I kept. This kind of taught me how to manage, and I would go on to do the Advocator after this. And I realized while doing the Advocator how much trouble we must have all been. I think this is also, if I'm not mistaken, me and an editor who first worked on Barbara Unleashed and was later replaced, just for different reasons, helped me, like I said, a cut by 1,000 edits. But I think it came out as a really good story, and I'm proud of it to this date. Down to my last 3 copies. I will not be getting more of these copies. I am very happy what's behind it. I've thought about spinning it into other projects because I like the story so much, because I don't want it to die, and I do have the rights for it. One day I might republish it, but for now, 3 copies, and this is out of my collection. And it was an interesting time. I really didn't know much. I wrote a prose and submitted the prose, and I got accepted. And I was approached to be part of this. It was the first time I was approached and didn't go out. And since this project, I've said no to so many projects, not because of this project, but because I really felt like I worked with high caliber people, and I wanted to work with people who were very passionate. And if I felt like a project wasn't about passion, I always passed on it. And I got that passion from being on this project. So I really loved my time on The Fourth Monkey. I'm sorry that it didn't get a wider berth and more notice. Sometimes as a creator, you've worked on something, you really think that should be like, this should be your big moment to have a book that the world sees. And this would have been one of those moments. Welcome to the Behind the Comics. Welcome to Behind the Comics, and They Call Us Monsters episode, a Mr. AnderSiN creation, first put out through Written Sins Comics, or Sinsful Comics at the time. This was pretty exciting for me. This would wind up being my second book. I did 3 books in a row. Barbara Unleashed, and They Call Us Monsters, and Jax the AnderSiN. All were being worked on at the same time. Barbara happened to come out first, but they're all being worked on the same time. And this just kind of came up because I was the indie advocate, and I was advocating for other people. And my cohort and artist on the book came up and said, "Do you want to work with me?" And they go under KVG now, but at the time went under a different name. That's not why I'm not really calling out the name. But they came up and said, "Do you want to work on something together?" And I said, I was like, "What are you thinking?" And I loved the watercolor that they were doing at the time. And they said, "Well, anything you want." Now, this is a time when 50 Shades of Grey is coming out, and I'm writing Barbara Unleashed and finishing it up. We're in the middle of edits and just finishing off some last pages of art. And I'm like, I would love to make a story about monsters who aren't monsters, who are human beings with genetic disorders. And it's Hollywood who are the real monsters for making them monsters on the silver screen for gold coins. And that's kind of what we wound up doing. And also, sadly, Chris Cornell had passed during this. And I came up with the idea, and we got like a cool Scooby-Doo vibe. I love the art color. This I thought was going to be a commercial success because I took the classic Universal monsters, but I made them human beings, explained it away. I thought this was brilliant. It's got a Scooby-Doo vibe. To this date, I love this book. There were 2 sequels, Monster Betrayal and We're Not Monsters. Each one was Kickstarted, each one successfully funded. And the last one was PDF only, but I love my time on this. First time lettering, I took a lot of chances. It was not the most popular book ever. Let's just put it that way. But I still love it to this date. And some of my fans really like this one because this is genuinely unique. Sadly, we're down to the very last amount of books that we have. We don't even have issue 2, and we've never printed issue 3. The idea is maybe one day to make this a trade magazine size. I don't know. We'll see when we get there. Kidsofcreators.com was a failed project. So we'll get to that in the Jax book. But the short story was the artist who I had teamed up with and we were going to do something decided to go their own way and make their own project and left me high and dry. And that happens in comics. They decide they can go out on their own. They did great work for me. I've got no hard feelings towards them. Sinsful Comics, also something that I walked away from. It was the other side of indie. I walked away from it because at the time I got divorced, and this was something that had the ex's name on it, and I wanted to walk away from that. So all the rights were mine. So I took it and went my own way. This was definitely something I was excited about. The 3 books were pretty awesome. We took a long time. Me and the artist had made the 3rd book before 2020, believe it or not. 2020 came up and it ruined everything. And this wasn't a very popular book. It stayed in a drive. And as a matter of fact, the art disappeared from a drive. There was some sort of technical glitch. We lost all the original art. He's a champ. KVG redid all the art, recolored it last year during the summer while I was moving. I lettered it while I was moving. We put it on Kickstarter. We successfully funded it and got it into people's digital hands because it was only a PDF project. To this date, I have so much love for this project. There's always a call when you're recording. That kind of kicked me off. But yeah, I love this project. I love finishing it. Really want to see Manny, who wound up crossing over in the Advocator. So we have a story of Manny where he started to be a detective. And I was going to have Martha Schwartz join me. She did the cover to do the series. We just haven't gotten there. 2020 screwed so many things up. But I love the universe, a Comic-Con where anything can happen, where Barbara Unleashed dressed up as a cosplayer for the actual Into the Sock. And at the time, the story had her having red hair for a reason. That's more than likely still going to happen. But I even tried to do a spinoff where Barbara cosplay. It was called Cosview, and it was going to be her going to different cons and meeting all these new creative things. And that's just another thing that never happened. Cosviewed was going to be this story of Barbara dressing up as different characters too, but sometimes you have great ideas and people can't see the vision, and sometimes the great ideas aren't so great. But I was very excited about this, and we got some cool art from Chris Mad due to this story. So this all became it. And I even re-released it at the 5-year anniversary of losing Keith Thomas. Manny wound up in the Continuum. So, and remember, I was writing Barbara Unleashed when I came up with And They Call Us Monsters. So there's like connective tissue here, kink and monsters. So the hashtag for monsters, of course, would be hashtag Dracula, hashtag Frankenstein, hashtag Mummy, hashtag The Invisible Man, hashtag The Wolfman, hashtag Wolfman, hashtag Steampunk. I actually use steampunk in that, and we have a steampunk cover. Hashtag monsters. And this was a really fun project to work on. Welcome to Behind the Comics. Welcome to Behind the Comics. And They Call Us Monsters episode, a Mr. AnderSiN creation, first put out through Written Sins Comics, or Sinsful Comics at the time. This was pretty exciting for me. This would wind up being my second book. I did 3 books in a row. Today in Behind the Comics, we're going to go behind the scenes that Enter the Continuum and what it spawned. We're not going to get into the whole story, but you're going to learn a lot. So as the Advocator was coming to an end, I joined up with people to create the Continuum. And I don't want to get into the whole story, so I'm going to give you the really short one. And it's going to explain some things coming up. But this is everything that's left from the Continuum. So here's the story. It's 2020. I come together with some creators to continue the work I was doing with the Advocator. I won't mention the creators. One day, maybe. Today's not about that. But they were very unethical people who did very unethical things. And once again, some of it, I didn't have the best ego. I had been going through a very tough time with 2020. And people said they wanted to work on things and didn't want to work. Some of them wanted to get paid, wanted to take advantage. Some other people had some problems with some other people. It really was ego at the worst. And towards the end of the original Continuum team, and we let the public pick the name, the Continuum, by the way, Mike Seeley wound up joining me and brought his character Eclipse in that I was writing. And we'll talk about that more in the series. The important part is during a Kickstarter, right after we launched, one of the people who we allowed to take the mantle of CEO, and at the time we're going to remove them because of the things they'd been saying and doing and political citing, decided, and it was under their name, decided that they were going to do everything they could to sabotage us. And despite that, we raised and had a successfully funded Kickstarter. That person then, despite saying they would do it, decided they were going to screw us, because no matter how much they talked badly about us, and no matter how hard they tried, we were successful, decided to tell Kickstarter that they wouldn't accept the money, wouldn't give us the money. So we wound up raising all that money and never got a penny. Mike Seeley stepped up, gave us the money to print this first edition. This has a special story just for the Kickstarter. The creator was very nice, allowed us to have it, and we still have their alternate cover for the project. We have a few of these left. It's a bigger one. It's 48 pages. Really kind of did us a solid, and they gave us this story by the sword. Russ Leach. Stand-up guys stood with us for this. We would re-release the Continuum without his actual story. This was only for Kickstarter. He didn't want to disappoint the fans, but didn't want to be in the drama. So we have nothing but respect and love for him. And this is the first time we have Wolf and Fox. This is the first time we meet Eclipse. And Barbara Unleashed story comes here to replace what was this story, because in the main release, we weren't going to have that. We wanted to have more stuff. So that we wound up getting 2 copies of the same book. This one's 40 pages. This is 48. And even though we didn't need, because Russ hooked us up and stayed on for the project, we had put Barbara in this one too to give more value. We paid to give people books. I cannot stress this enough. We paid for the shipping. We paid everyone, every single copy. We got no money from Kickstarter. We went out of pocket a couple grand. And that set off the Continuum thing on a defiant foot, but a good foot. We lost all the partners except me and Mike Seeley, and a lot happened. And I don't want to get into all of it. Just know that me and Mike Seeley pushed on through 2020 and 2021. We would not let it go. And there were so many problems, starting with the first book when we published it. We had all these alternate covers that we couldn't do. But when we hemorrhaged all these people who were supposed to be our partners. So by the time we got this second book, we even get a printing problem. If you can see it, I'm trying to show it off. So this is the right cover. See the shiny sleekness of it? See how this is flat and muted? So we wind up getting a double order because of the mistake. They let us, the printer, Direct Impressions and Comics Impressions, hooked us up, just reprinted it for us. And we wound up having all these extra issues. So we had a big amount of books. This is all that's left. The alternate covers. Wolf and Fox didn't sell really well up there, only because they never really put it on my table. I kind of hoarded those. Reapers never really took off. We also held on to the original alt cover because the alt covers are bigger books. They're the 48-page books. So we held on, and right over here in this Russ Leach cover, just amazing. I kind of held on to those two, and the Eclipse we're almost out of. They're actually dwindling. And then we had these 2 different versions. Now, we've sold a lot. This is actually a very popular book, believe it or not, at Comic-Cons. However, this day and age, because there were less Comic-Cons due to the costs, we haven't been able to sell them the same way. Now, we could have just quit after this. We had done it. We had put it. Mike Seeley did not want it. And to Mike Seeley's credit, he goes out and he gathers everyone for the second book, basically. Because I'm kind of spent after all this. So Mike Seeley steps up and brings together an amazing array of characters. I wind up finishing a Gothic Blues story. That's something that someone in my life had created on their own. We got Sad Hill, and this is from Peterson, who's an amazing creator in his own right. We got Legacy of the View. This had a lot of energy. And of course, I get to do my first story for JW, which an artist did, but kind of screwed me over. So I used whatever art I had and cut it up and made a story out of it for whatever little I had. And then we would have Sergio Rios join us in Expanse to continue the story of a hero who is heroing by the hour, the world's only superhero. So we have this. We have the first appearance of 8-Ball. And then we get on to Expanse, which we continue it. And in Expanse, we get to team up with Fish Lee. I get to do the second part of the heroing by the hour. We get to have the influencer who's more than meets the eye. And, he's not a transformer. Wolf and Fox, which started all the way over here, which is a divorced duo trying to learn how to co-parent the city they both love while wanting to just tear into each other. We had Fish Lee give us an official alternate cover, and I'm not a huge alt cover fan, But this series I thought did amazing with the all covers. We even Wolf and Fox was never supposed to be on this cover. That was actually a printing mistake. We sent the wrong actual file. So we weren't supposed to have that. That was on us. We made an oopsie. We added a, a name on that. Team Redeemers was we just for like a team poster that we had used. And I think that during the printing process, we wound up not realizing that Wolf and Fox, this was actually supposed to be for the first book, and it wound up not working out. But we put it on the Kickstarter and didn't realize it till people had already backed it. So we just went with it. And I think we put Team Redeemers up there on that. And this is kind of where the story ends with Continuum for now. We don't know what's going to happen. This is the crossover from Specs Thomas, who gives us Thompson, sorry, Specs Thompson, not Thomas Thompson. I'm thinking of Keith Thompson from the by the way, for those who don't know, the crossover between Manny Wolf, Barbara, and Keith Thomas into the Suck was in the Continuum as well, and that started in the Advocator. So this was a lot of awesomeness. We got to introduce Wolf and Fox. The Influencer is something I'm very proud of and want to expand one day. Hearing by the Hour had the kind of crossover covers between Expanse and Heroics. We even had a special preview book. I had never done that before. There was a lot of energy that went into this. And all of a sudden, right when we thought we were starting to cook, at the end of 2021, publishers became a bad thing. Publishers who had been taking advantage. I've had problem with a publisher myself, and we just decided we wanted out of the publisher game for a while. We put Continuum on the back burner. We have these books to sell, Wolf and Fox, The Influencer, In the Blocks, so many great stories in the Continuum. And it started from hardship, and it was just pure grit that got us here to this amazing collection. Of course, we want to share it with all of you. Some great stories in here. I call these comic sodes. Either they're pilots for something brand new like Influencer, and even Wolf and Fox grew out of this, or it's pre-established franchise coming to pay us a visit. Some great art from, and it really was a creative vibe, one that I don't know if we'll ever be able to recreate. As painful as the process was, it really made me grow up in comics, and I'm so glad to see it spread on my floor and be so proud of how far we came. Huge shout out to Mike Seeley. None of this would have been possible without him, and you'll have to stay tuned to see what happens Continuum. But this is its own issue now, as is today. And welcome to Behind the Comics. In this episode, we'll be checking out the story behind Barbara Unleashed. This is one of those things that is going to be known as my life's work. It has even spawned a TikTok channel. It is a comic book that is meant to be educational. It is meant to not only own, but be able to hand someone, whether they're a vanilla friend or a potential partner, to get you to speak the same language about building a dynamic, about kink. You're going to see alternate covers. We're going to just quickly go over the concept of the book, and then I'll go over the different things that came along the way, covers, new releases, and all that. But first, we started all the way over here with Barbara Unleashed. You can see the original name. We've changed it since then to Barbara Unleashed, a young woman's journey through the New York City kinky underground, or fetish underground. It was all about learning who she really could be, the potential of those kinks, compellers, and fetishes that drove her to leave her home, where her dad was the mayor, so she could explore who she is. But quickly things get out of hand, and by the second issue, she feels like people have stolen her very connection to her kinks, her compellers, and her fetishes. She's suffering from the aftermath of the first issue. And by the third issue, Mentor Search, she realizes the only way to regain that kind of connection to those kinks, compellers, and fetishes is to get a mentor to help her regain her actual connection to them. And then the BDSM survey was our first time of giving you a mostly non-fictional adaptation of a way to build a dynamic. And this, of course, is something I was very proud of, very in-depth, and it's actually going to be giving birth to a completely nonfiction story coming in 2025, not story, but actual process, if you would, to work together to build a dynamic with someone. The Desire Index, which has many different covers, including the first time I used a misdirect cover, it's a quick way to start a dynamic. This is what you start with: a new partner. You guys are speaking the same language now. You have a basic understanding. There's so much that goes into this, but this is a kickstart point. This is a way to start a dynamic very quickly, and it even comes with negotiation pages. We did use art from the project. Going forward, we're going to try to limit using our comic book art for the more educational aspects. This is going to be collected into a trade. We're going to get into a lot of this, but I do want to just give a quick shout out. One of my favorite things I ever created, the poo-poo platter of BDSM. We're going to get into all of this a little more in depth in just a few seconds, but wait. So creating this book inspired, and they call us monsters, which is the classic universal monsters turned into human beings, giving genetic disorders, and it's Hollywood for making the monsters on the silver screen for gold coins. The reason this is connected, I was writing Barbara Unleashed and finishing it. We were getting really close to the end. We're on final edits. And this artist, KVG, came up to me and said, did I want to work with them? I said, yes, love the watercolor arts. And for some reason, it struck me that 50 Shades of Grey was basically them turning us kinky people into monsters on the silver screen. So I came up with this idea that would span actually going into The Advocator, which is a story where I used Barbara to dress up like Keith Thomas, who sadly passed away. The art is by C.B. Zane, amazing art. And he drew Barbara. She dresses up as this character and meets Manny the Wolf from the Monsters series. So there was even this crossover of comic books. We even had at a time wanted to make Barbara a cosplayer so she could interact with different creators' creations. But because it was about kink, there was some bias, and so my heart was broken, and that project never really took off. But clearly it hasn't ended, and it continues to this date. Let's get into some fun facts. First one released, because it was the first comic I ever released for commercial, was magazine sized. Aftermath and Barbara Unleashed, when it was re-released, each had a single issue run, which you guys can see right here. These are single issues, which had a kind of cool flip cover. But I also did the first ever dual book. It's a mini graphic novel flip book. So that was the first release. So this gets released. We release the single issues, sell out of the single issues of 1, 2, and 3. This is literally, that's all that's left. And we even went through another publisher, Kablam. I don't have any of those copies, all sold out. We recently, as of last year, did another reprint. The first issue has been printed 5, maybe 6. No, it might be 6 times now. 6 times Barbara Unleashed has been printed. The first issue and the second issue. Same with Mentor Search. Each one of them has had at least 4 printings. I think Barbara Unleashed 1 is now in its 5th or 6th printing. I can't even keep up. We have sold that many copies. However, this is the last time any of this will be single issues. We gave a preview of things to come. And this was a different flip book that we just put out. Barbara Unleashed, the Mentor Search, was the only one we have a lot of alternate covers with. I really didn't do alternate covers for the first 2. As you guys can see, this is a crossover of front and back cover that's very popular. Barbara Unleashed over here, showing a dominant side. We haven't seen the book yet. It's like a cast of the future. And her for the future, or for her being a student here for the future education she's going to get from our main character, Bruce. The BDSM survey is out of print. I just happened to find these today. I didn't even know I had them. I thought I was completely out. I've only got 4 or 5 of those. The first, and again, it's the reason it's fictional and not fictional is it's told by Barbara. And this is Chris Madd's amazing work. And you can see if you stop the video, you'll see it says 50 Shades of B. I call the S. So, people got kind of confused because the comic is educational. It's a fictional character kind of introducing you to the world, and there are real people in it from the different issues. And people kind of got confused by that, especially when we came out with the survey. They didn't know if it was part of the story. I was having a fictional character guide people through something. I thought it was clever. Some people don't quite get it, especially if they're not in the comics. And speaking of an alternate cover, here's a rare single issue. These I only recently found during the move. And I think I only have 2 of them left, maybe 3. Is that 3? 3 of those left. So, yeah, and this is signed by Chris Mad, has the alternate. This is like rare packs that I have. This is it. This is the end of the collection. This is sold as a series well over 1,000 issues. Book I made to go over 1,000 issues, counting, especially counting digital, but even print, we're over 1,000. Also had issues ruined during Ian. And again, I'm not a huge alternate cover person. That's why really the 3rd issue only had it. We just had to keep reprinting. Every time we reprinted, we changed a little bit. So we wanted to do something new every time we're going to the printer. And we even had some problems. Some of these books, I think I sold them all. Half of them were missing pages. Whatever's left there, we have the pages now. But we had done over 100 copies, and that's all what you see is what we have. This is a best-selling comic book. There's rare places. Only Fort Myers, Florida is a place I've never sold it at a Comic-Con. I did sell it at the street fair, at the art fair in Fort Myers, but could never do it. So super excited about all the different covers we had a lot of fun. Definitely gonna do the trade this year. We're expecting to have it out by the end of the year. The Desire Index had 3 covers, but there was a purpose for these 3 covers. That one is the main cover. This is a misdirect cover, and this is a low-key cover. This is so if people had it out in public, they didn't have to really explain anything. This was just if you didn't really want to misdirect. And this is all we have left. This is all we have left. We ordered a lot of these. We ordered 200 of these books, and this is it. And we barely went to Comic-Cons. I'm so excited that people were so excited to get this. And again, I'm shocked how little I have. I thought I had so much more. This has been an amazing project. Yes, we have a sequel series coming in. Right now, it's 3 issues, 2 educational books. We have the Kinky Calculator on its way. We're far from done. This has been one of those projects where it's cost me greatly being a kinky educator in comic books. I have had people talk downly. I had a publisher tell me I couldn't put this with the other book I created, Cat Dad and Supermom. Literally told I had to change my name to be the author of that to do this. And I made this book in a kid's book to prove that there was nothing wrong with kinky people. Still going, still trying to get out there and change minds. And this is the last thing I'll leave you with. Believe it or not, I wrote this with the idea of handing this series to a vanilla person so they could better understand us, that we're not the fetish. We have fetishes, we have compellers, and we have kinks. If you want a copy, get it now. I'm not reprinting any of them. Welcome to Behind the Comics. We're going to talk about The Eclipse, the first time as a writer that I am working with someone else's toys. I was brought on to write an idea that wasn't my own. This is Behind the Comics with Mr. AnderSiN's creations, except today it's not about one of his creations, but Mike Seeley's creation and what Mr. AnderSiN did for it as a writer. So if you've been watching the Behind the Comics series, you probably have already seen that the character Eclipse started here in Enter the Continuum and actually had its second issue via Team Redeemers, or second part of the story, not second issue. Second issue is coming out in Kickstarter very soon, so stay tuned for that. But yes, that's a character based on me. That's Mr. Robinson. But we use Team Redeemers to introduce the Eclipse. In the second issue, you're going to get to know so much more about the Eclipse character. One of the best things I like about this project, not only did it start from someone else's mind, because these are ideas from Mike Seeley when he was a kid, and I helped write it and bring it to life and bust it to life. And you guys can see the alternate covers. I don't even have all the alternate covers anymore. This is just what's left. Great seller. People love the Hawaiian hero who'd rather stay in Hawaii. Hashtag Samoan, hashtag Hawaii. This has got some great energy. Mike's the creator. First time I'm on a project where I'm not the creator behind the idea. I was given all this. I was given these toys, told things about them, and I made a story, and I made a story for other characters called the Redeemers, and I wound up in the book. This was like bringing so many characters to life all at once. It was so much fun, and I'm so excited about a second issue coming out. Solar Flare, Love the bad guy. I'm a huge bad guy fan. If you don't hate the bad guy, what are you doing? Eclipse comes out of the Continuum. As messy as the Continuum might have been as a publisher, there were some great ideas that came from it, and Eclipse is definitely one of them. And I love the characters that we have in this story that just comes to life. And there you go. You got not only is there Eclipse, but you got Lucky, Charm, Burn Notice, Ruby Red, and Chef. And that's Mr. Robinson, based on me. Crazy, right? And it's definitely one of those badass stories. Second issue's coming. We find out what happened to the Redeemers. We learn more about not just Solar Flare, but we learn more about Eclipse. But this definitely left in a cliffhanging moment. You're going to want to get the second issue. This was a best-selling cover. It's in a second print right now. We just have a few copies of each. The books under that Eclipse book, believe it or not, are Wolf and Fox books. It's not even Eclipse books. I didn't want it to be further down for when I recorded it, so I threw some Wolf and Fox under there. And Mike Seeley winds up being the artist behind part of Wolf and Fox, and then Sergio Rios takes over, but he winds up staying on as the colorist for this story. Now, there are, I believe he used different colorists, and Sasha was the editor. There's Mike Seeley. There's me under Bobby Gregory, because during this time I was dealing with nonsense of I couldn't be a creator with Mr. Anderson, so I used Bobby Gregory for my Cat Dad story. Talk about being confused as a creator. It wasn't Mike's fault. I chose that. I wound up getting credit as the letterer in the book as well. So it wasn't Mike. I chose to do that because at the time I thought I was going to stay with Bobby Gregory because I was under contract with Scout, which is a whole messy thing on its own and for another video, and certainly not behind the comics. That's behind the publishers, a special report. But Mike Seeley definitely is pretty amazing, and there he is drawing Wolf and Fox. I was super excited to play with someone else's toys for the first time, and I think we came up with some great storytelling, me and Mr. Seeley. I definitely love the background characters that you're going to get to know, and this is Goldie. So I don't want to spoil it. You know, when you get excited about it, I really liked having someone kind of tell me no that wasn't an editor and they had more of a say. 'Cause with the editor, I pay them, so I'm the boss. Mike winds up being the boss on this. It taught me a lot in that regard. So this is what I mean, this is what I love doing. I love creating. This is a great story. And I know the energy that Mike Seeley put behind it. I had to learn about the islands. I had to do research. I read books. I learned more about the language, the culture. I wanted authentic kind of representation in the book. I love Solar Flare as a villain. Let me see. I think I've got one cover I saved just for this video. You ready for this? This is my cover. I actually dug it out because I had it there. This is from my personal collection because I wanted to make sure I had these because I like to keep everything. And, you know, Continuum still will produce Eclipse. Wolf and Fox did not go under the Continuum label because, again, it wasn't Continuum's fault. It was just a bad time to be a publisher. And with all the stuff we'd gone through, we decided to kind of back away from being a publisher. Eclipse kind of stands on its own. It doesn't need the Continuum label. It's an amazing story. When it goes on Kickstarter, definitely jump on. The Hawaiian hero who'd rather be the Hawaiian hero has no desire to leave Hawaii, despite the fact that he's being courted by Mr. Robinson. This is Behind the Comics, the Wolf and Fox episode. If you've been watching the show, you know how hard it was to get Wolf and Fox and Continuum even published in that first issue, as a person who we had teamed up with betrayed us and did awful things. Go back to the Behind the Comics episode about Continuum Comics and you'll read about it. We want to stay positive. We want to stay about Wolf and Fox, a divorced duo who want to learn how to work with each other so they can co-parent the city they both love, but all they want to do is rip into each other. They're going to wind up on the couch. We wound up managing not only to get it out in that first issue, but it became its own issue. Sergio Rios joined us to finish the first issue. We have it out there. We definitely want to make a second issue. It's probably the one comic book I have the most of right now because it is the last comic book I have released that wasn't digital. Monsters was a PDF version. So I have plenty of copies of this. I want to get it into people's hands. It's definitely a great story in my opinion. I love the energy of the story. We're gonna flip a little bit. Some of the art in this just blew me away. The way that it was conceived and the things that were done in it. Heroing, Sergio Rios is behind Heroing as well. I can't wait to get that book into people's hands. This is exciting. This talks about divorce in a very honest way. Had a first time editor work with me on this. So proud to have worked with that editor and gotten this book out for you guys. And every different chapter we kind of had M go over, even the ones that they didn't necessarily start on. And very excited. I even have the Bobby Gregory names. At the time, we didn't know what we were going to do with it. Again, for those who don't know, when I printed Cat, Dad, and Superman, went through a publisher, Scout, they made me change my name for it, literally. And we'll talk about that when I get to Cat, Dad, and Supermom a little bit. But Wolf and Fox, I'm so happy to have created. It's very powerful. Happy to have worked with the people I did on this project once we got rid of the original artist. And the energy in this, just, I can't even tell you how proud I am of it. I'm not a huge alternate cover fan, so when we came to alternate covers, I did the double. The first time ever they're not in costumes winds up on this. This was Kickstarter exclusive. I won't sell it at a Comic-Con table. I will only sell it to true fans of the project because I thought it was really cool. And we have an idea of how they look behind the costumes. So look forward to that. Mike Seeley did a cover, and he was the original artist between the first part of the first issue. So this is just really exciting to me because it talks about divorce honestly, and it shows how twisted we can become. First loved a person, and now you want to rip into them. That kind of ugliness. And we use thought bubbles to really kind of explain what's going on through the characters' minds, more so Fox, but Wolf has some insights that you can get to too. And you know, it's definitely catches them in a very bad place as they're changing literally and figuratively, and they're going to wind up in therapy because at the end of this issue they really screwed up. And this is very powerful stuff to me, and it's very personal. I've gone through a divorce. While it's not based on my divorce, it's certainly like talking to people and see how it's affected people. Even my own son, that Jax the AnderSiN is based upon, and Cat, Dad, and Supermom, my own son. I wrote this so one day he could read it and kind of understand what I went through when he's old enough. But I don't necessarily think he's old enough yet. And I'm super excited about this project. I want to see where we can go with it. I want to see them in therapy. And for those who don't know, this is a true story. Cat, Dad, and Supermom originally, I wanted to age up eventually and make them a little older. And when I pitched the idea to the editor at the time of the book and the artist, and I didn't even pitch it as them being part of it, because if I did the adult version, like Rugrats in high school, kind of that idea with Cat, Dad, and Supermom, like they didn't like the more serious tone. So I was like, okay. So I like the idea of dealing with divorce and all that. So I decided to come up with it. And for some reason, Wolf and Fox just hit me one day. I loved the idea, and Wolf and Fox was born. And it's one of my more favorite things that I've created. It's obviously available. It's the one book I have a good amount. Like, we haven't sold much because I stopped going to conventions right as this came out. So I've kind of sat on this book, which is sad because everyone who's read it has had nothing. This is Behind the Comics, the Wolf and Fox episode. If you've been watching the show, you know how hard it was to get. In this episode of Behind the Comics, we look into a little creation that some people might know named Cat, Dad, and Supermom, and explain how it is about autism in a way, about my real life son, and definitely about the power of imagination. So everything here started with this idea that I was going to get together with another creator, and we're all going to tell stories about creators and tell stories about our kids and the power of their imagination. So I came up with this story, and another creator, the artist behind the first book I ever did, that Cat Dad and Supermom kind of showed up in, was really excited about it, was going to do it about their child. We even did some art. It just fell apart. It was going to be called Kids of Creators. It just didn't happen. But from the ashes, like I said, I had the story of Jax the AnderSiN already, and my son at the time was ripping up comic books, and he was just making, not comic books, regular books and comic books. Anything I gave him, the autistic little Jax would rip up. So I decided I wanted to put an end to that. So what did I do? I decided I was going to make him a comic book. So I let him watch the process, and I made this book, and it was very loud, and I make him ask me, what makes a superhero? And we have this big long conversation, and as he falls asleep, he sees his parents becoming superheroes. And at the time, it was Supermom was the name, but I wasn't Cat Dad, I was Cat Man. And it was a different take on it, but the focus wasn't Cat Dad and Supermom. It was really just Jax and his imagination. And this was made for him at the time, the younger age he was. And what was, so who's your favorite superhero? And then we were going to have the books at the Comic Cons. It was going to be a huge anthology. And there's Dave, did an amazing job. Dave decided to move on to his own project, kind of leaving this whole idea of the Kids of the Creators just dead in the water. And that happens in comics. Sometimes things don't come to life. So I kind of moved on. I had the book for my kid. This book stops him from ripping up any other book. It gets through his autistic fog and makes him interested in it. He wore out his first copy. Successfully Kickstarted, so thrilled about it. And I even would update it later when we released Cat Dad and Supermom. Now, the funny thing is that I was pretty well known as a comic book advocate. So some people come and want to work with me. I don't always say yes. A lot of times I honestly say no. But with Raheel, I really liked his energy when he approached me. So we made a 1-page, and we used part of that. Well, no, it was a 2-page story. We used part of that 2-page story, and we just made it up. It was just for a handout. And he really liked Jax the AnderSiN. He had wound up getting his hands on a copy, read it, and loved it. And he said, what would you think about developing the Catman and Supermom story? And I said, well, if we're going to do it, let's make him Cat Dad. Let's completely change it, and let's really lean in and make that the focus of the story. We'll use Jax, my real life son. He'll be autistic. We don't really mention he's autistic because why would you, right? But we come up with this concept, and it's what happens when you see someone bully a person. And this happens to be his friends, and the principal asks what Jax saw, and he comes home and he talks to me, his dad, and Raheel just picked the colors on his own, went with the look he did. I know this was fairly Godparents inspired, and I wrote this story for him. We were excited to work together. Comes up with this amazing world. And to be transparent, one of the challenges I had on a live video was I was like, there's no story I can't create. So someone said, make a story about an elephant. And I said, an elephant? Sure, no problem. Make one that farts. And this was my answer. The farts are used almost like a Green Lantern ring. In other words, the farts can be turned into shapes. And the most exciting part of this is the fact that I proved that words can hurt you as a word train hits Supermom. This has been like one of the most fun projects I've ever had. We actually failed our first Kickstarter, believe it or not, hit right during the beginning of 2021. No, 20, was it? Yeah, it was 2020, the pandemic. We were on Kickstarter, completely fails. One of the last shows I go to in 2020, don't understand it. This is about my son. I know the world's acting funny, and I kind of give up. And on the Kickstarter, we just canceled the Kickstarter. Or did I let it fail? I might have just let it fail, but I stopped promoting it. I was like, it's just the time, but I'm not done with the story. I know I've had people read advanced copies. We had printed, as a matter of fact, before the Kickstarter, I invested my own money, and I had printed the 2019 advanced version. You can see that. We don't have many of these left, but this was it, the very first printing. It was a Comic-Con exclusive. So before I did a Kickstarter, I printed the book. It's how energetic I was and how much I believed in it. If I only knew the money that it would cost me in 2020 and how badly I'd be hurt, I probably wouldn't have done it this way, but I did. We sold out of the books and I couldn't get it to fund on Kickstarter. It was crazy. We would later win an award and make an award cover one and even make a flip book. When I slightly redid the Jack's book, we relettered it and made the letters pop a little less, went back and kind of improved the story a little bit, had a second try with it, made it a flip book. And this is actually the last, I should treat it better because this is my last, I have 2 flip books left now. So this is Cat Dad and Supermom, the next release. So I've printed it, I think, 4 times now. I'm out of the, one of the ones I'm out of right now, we don't have it anymore. It was just that cover the way it was. It's been printed in India, by the way, and there was somehow a miscommunication where the Indian press put Raheel as the creator and writer. So somewhere this book is out there and they don't think I'm the creator behind it. Mike Seeley did a cover for us. Really loved that. I think this was one of the first times me and Mike actually worked together. Loves this story, Mike Seeley. Had Josh Lyman gave me a super duper cover during the 2020 for the Kickstarter because we went back and re-kickstarted it and succeeded. We actually printed this book during that Kickstarter along with a regular non-award cover. The non-award cover, this is basically it for issue 1, guys. This is all I have. Scout Comics does have more issues, and I'm going to show you something Scout did to me. Now, Scout and me haven't had the best of relationships, to be honest. They barely promoted this. And part of that reason is I create a fetish book, and they told me to basically stop creating a fetish book and only become a children's author. Or there was no or, it just, there was punishment after it. I was never advertised. They didn't do anything to help the project. It was sad. I don't really want to go more into it because it upsets me every time I talk about it. But I mean, just to talk about like how Scout treated me, if you go look up Scout Comics, you'll see the trouble that other creators have had. It's just not me. For a while, I thought I was just being punished, but it turns out they just don't treat creators very well. And that later this year in 2025, all the rights revert back to me. So I'm pretty excited about that. So right now, we haven't put anything out because why would I put out something with someone who's not partnering with me as a publisher? But look at this book. What's missing? They screwed up. And I'd said this earlier in the Continuum book where we put a title on by accident, but they didn't bother putting a title on there. When I pointed it out, they didn't bother putting any energy into it. Imagine really loving a comic and having it treated poorly. Of course, we put out the second issue, Cat Dad and Supermom, What Makes a Hero. We made coloring book covers. Lance Footer gave us this amazing Lego-inspired cover, and Admiral Heroes here on this one that Mike Seeley did. We got special comic book covers for a comic book shop because a comic book store loved the book that much. They wanted their own covers, and that's the official Scout release. Ours is a little more durable. You can get copies still at scout.com, especially for the first issue because I don't have enough issues. Cat Dad and Supermom over there, the second issue. It's there. It's about Jack's going to a Comic-Con and meeting his hero, but his hero's not a real person. It's just an actor. So we go into depth and figure it out about, you know, what's behind his story. Like what makes a hero? What are the elements? And I really love this. It shows up at another Comic-Con. A lot of my comic books a lot of stories I've made have wound up at Comic-Cons. But I thought it was really cool. We talk about the expectation of an actor and all that. Comics in kids' hands, still something I'm very passionate about, the power of comics in kids' hands. I love comic books. I couldn't have read without them. And I love seeing my son in this. This is definitely a project that not only sells well, but I'm super excited about and love. I'm just sorry that Scout never took us seriously and gave us the love we deserved. But there will be more Cat Dad in the future. You can get copies of this at scout.com or straight from me. Just leave a comment. I'll get you. In this episode of Behind the Comics, we look into